Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In this midweek edition, after a little break from crunching numbers, our By the Numbers segment returns with our last 5 races analysis, biggest movers, race progression graphs showing how the teams performed at Darlington, and our Mario Kart point standings. Speaking of numbers, today's episode is a special one dealing with numbers and analytics because it features an interview with Hendrick Motorsports technical director, Tom Gray. I have really become intrigued with AI over the last year personally and looking for ways on how I can incorporate it in my daily life, including professionally. Naturally, I'm curious to see how AI is being implemented in NASCAR. So I decided why not go to the top team in the sports history and see how they're using it. And now I'd like to welcome to the channel the Hendrick Motorsports technical director, Tom Gray. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, it's great to be here.
So before we kind of get into the whole AI discussion, I want to kind of give my audience a little idea of your background. So you're obviously the technical director at Hendrick Motorsports, but prior to that, kind of tell me, I think I read on your resume that the last 15 years you'd been working as a lead race engineer, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep, lead race engineer for starting with the 5, then the 24 with Jeff Gordon, and then most recently the 9 and Chase Elliott. So I was fortunate enough to be the lead engineer when we won the championship in 2020. And through that time in my race engineering career, Alan Gustafson and I have always been a pair. So I think that's interesting. We were like the longest running engineer crew chief pair in the garage for a while. So
Okay, so now last year, I guess it was, you got moved up into the technical director position. So just looking at your LinkedIn bio, you're responsible for kind of trying to give the technical guidance for the organization and where you're going. So that obviously would include the use of AI. So before we get into the business use of it, I'm just curious, Tom, how long have you been using AI? Because as I've delved into this a little deeper, I think to myself, okay, when did I start using it? And I know like there's intentionality with using like Chat GPT and the LLMs, but there's also using software like Photoshop that has different components that are AI, or the editing software I use, it has all kinds of different AI components. So I'm just kind of curious for you and your perspective, when did you start personally using AI?
um, I think the lines get blurred a little bit between machine learning and AI. There's we've been using machine learning, and AI has really come a long way in a pretty short period of time. Like really, when you think Chat GPT or Anthropic or any of those Perplexity models, those have really only been around for the last maybe a couple of years in full force. But yeah, we've been using. I mean, we create in NASCAR a ton of data. So the struggle always is, and I think is a good translation to the real world, is how do we take all that data and do something with it? Like it's way more than a person can consume. So in that aspect, for a long time, I want to say at least for the past 8 years that I can remember, we've been heavily involved in either creating algorithms, machine learning, or leveraging some type of AI. Most recently, I guess most recently with AI as it's gotten way better.
Okay, so 8 years that you can kind of just pinpoint, like just I guess a generality of using it. So, but you said something in an interview. I think it was in the Charlotte Observer that I read, and you said information is speed in this game nowadays. So, what did you mean by that, and what does that exactly look like?
That looks like picture a world in when you need to make a decision like right now. What would it be the power in making the right decision at the right moment? And I think that's something when you look at a race and when you're watching a race, like it's that, when you're watching a movie and like the music starts getting heightened and you're like waiting for the main character to do the something, like that's what those crew chiefs, that's the environment that they're living. So how do they decide when to pit in the moment? Like how do they decide based on when everybody else is pitting, when the opportune time for them is to gain that track position, to gain clean air, to be able to optimize their tire stint and run life. Like those are the types of things that I think we're using AI in that sense, like to make the right decision at the right time.
Okay, so I know that it's the whole purpose of it for sports and just in general, well, specifically for sports and NASCAR is to gain a competitive advantage. And so just kind of give me a sense, because when I was reading that article, there's like a list that I put together of ways that I saw that teams are using AI in NASCAR. And one of them was developing talent. So kind of give me a sense of what that looks like.
Like in that sense, developing talent is both for the drivers and for really the engineers. Like from the driver perspective, it's we're using a little bit of AI, a small bit in, why those guys are in this driver in the loop simulation. Like everything we do now is a simulator. Like it's a computer. We don't get to practice anymore on track, so that's been how our sports kind of changed. The silver lining of that is because we're doing all these simulations on the computer, then that opens up the possibility of tools. You know, it's AI or machine learning. So, we're trying to aggregate driver data and then use some AI on top of that in order to tell them like, hey, you're more you, when you did these things, it resulted in a better lap time. So that's one way we've used it. And then the other way is to enable the engineers themselves to explore areas where they don't have any expertise. And I think, perplexity in everyone's daily life as a personal tutor. I think Vincent Wong said that anyway, or Jensen Wong said that. He said, I use perplexity as a personal tutor. That's the head of NVIDIA. So like it just tells you the power of being able to do things that you didn't think you were capable of doing and kind of pushing that envelope. So I think it's helped our people from top to bottom.
You mentioned something about the simulator, and that was actually a question I had further down, but because you brought it up, I want to mention it now. Is the simulator, would that be considered AI? Because I know it's a machine, I know machine learning. So would you consider that AI or the bulk of it AI?
No, I wouldn't. It's
Okay.
more of just, yeah, it's more of kind of really just an algorithm. It's a very, very fancy algorithm, but it works really well and it's pretty amazing. I mean, from the outside, you can look at it and say, like, man, there must be some AI in there. So they're certainly pretty impressive.
Okay. All right. The next thing that I had was streamlining operations, and I had reduced time analyzing photos and videos. So I know that, you can listen to a team radio, and if there's damage to a car, an incident to a car, they're saying, hey, get photos of that, get photos of that. So kind of give me a sense of what that looks like when it says, that you could reduce time analyzing photos, because obviously AI has the ability to look at photos and images and videos. So kind of give me a sense of what that looks like for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, there's photos coming in from everywhere. And you can use some image recognition to say like, hey, what car number is that? And then you can think about like if you have a bunch of photos, like how do you sort through those quickly? And you're going to want to tag those photos with certain characteristics. Maybe it's the car number, or maybe it's a driver name. And then you're getting this telemetry feed in, so there's lap data. So okay, now I know a photo at a certain lap and a certain car number. And then let's say like, oh, maybe it can through the background and AI, maybe it can figure out where it is on track. And so then I can sort photos by, hey, maybe I want to look at turn 3 from this car, this driver at this lap. And so really it's a way, again, like how do you take these large amounts of data and distill them really quickly? To your point, I've got damage. The car is in turn 3. Tell me what's wrong with it. And the engineer can go right to that shot through those filters and see exactly what that is and then report that to the crew chief. Ultimately, that's the power.
Okay. Wow. That's incredible stuff. That really is. Um, Pit stops. I know we have the cameras above, we have all these different things going on. And today, I think I just saw this morning about we're close on the precipice of 7-second, I think, pit stops where it's like right on the edge of that. So clearly the data, the technique, the single lug has obviously changed the game when it comes to pit stops. How has AI affected it?
I think, I think it's just sports in general. And this is what it's really interesting how AI has affected sports in general. And I think when you talk about the pit crew guys, you're really just talking athletes. And then you're talking about, okay, if you're an athlete, if you're a professional athlete at any level, you know, the greatest athletes have like a perfected motion. So like Tiger Woods swings the club better than any other golfer. I'm just using an example out there, right? Can you get AI to tell you what the most optimum motion is for changing a lug or to carry a jack or the path to run around the car? And I think that's really opened a lot of avenues in terms of, pit crews and what we do here in NASCAR racing. But I think sports in general has had a huge impact on as well. So, and I think it's an interesting iteration. We learn things from other sports teams, and they learn things from us. So it's an interesting information exchange.
Okay, so you just brought it up. So now I have to ask the whole concept, because like I said, I've been kind of exploring other sports. So can you give me a sense of kind of what you're looking for? Because, in understanding AI and looking into it, I know like with the NBA, they have cameras in all the arenas around the court. They have, I think it's like so many points of data on each individual player so they can see exactly their movements of what they're doing to try to prevent injury and all these different things. So I guess similar to that, you could kind of look at what the pit crews are doing and their motions and I guess prevent injury, if there were Achilles injuries in NASCAR pit stops like there are in basketball. So is that kind of how it works? Is like they have a camera or a video technology and like, okay, they're using that. So maybe we can try to apply that here.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's very much the same. And I think, the professional sports teams will help, like all these AI models at some point need to be trained. I think the interesting part is like you're on the verge of, super intelligence, which would be AI models training other other AI models. Sorry. So yes, I think other athletes training those models make our athletes better. And it's exactly that. It's, there's a lot of similarity in different sports. And just when you break down the human geometry into some motion, there's certainly things that we can pull from baseball that have similar motions to what we have, or other sports. We spend a lot of time sprinting, so there are a lot of other motions that we can get from that. So yeah, it's very much we utilize other technologies to leverage for ourselves.
One of the things that I read, Tom, was that I found really interesting was the whole use of team radios because AI can pick up on context and the tone, and so I was reading. I don't know if it was you guys or some other team that are feeding the team radios into AI, and it's kind of detecting strategies and what worked, and so that's fascinating to me to think because I'm a big listener of team radios of what's going on during a race and the frustrations. I obviously talk about that in my writing and my videos. So how does that work? I mean, how is AI, you're taking what the radios are saying and putting that in there? And I guess, is it just like cataloging everything that was said and tagging it?
Similar. Yeah, I think you're going to get a transcription. And I think it's interesting because it's not an easy task. Listening to a person like really clear, dictating with a microphone is one thing. But with
Sure.
a driver, you have like engine noise and the spotters, and there's all this ambient noise. So trying to get that thing to like decode the audio is a struggle, or can be. But yes, everything gets transcripted. Maybe we put a timestamp on it. Maybe we tag it with the driver. Maybe there's some AI that knows what a particular driver's voice signature is, and it can even tell who's talking, whether it's the driver, the spotter, the crew chief, even though they're all on one radio. I think all that is possible. And so yes, we tag each one of those events, and then you can use some type of keyword detection. So if a person says pit or fuel or something like that, maybe that alerts you, and you're able to adjust your strategy accordingly.
All right, a couple more things here, Tom. One of them was I read in that article. Um, I think it was you who said leveraging 4 decades of data, going back and testing old strategies, setups, and decisions with AI, predicting how past insights might inform future success. I mean, it almost sounds like so far out in this world, like crazy stuff going on, but that is where we are. So kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, it's basically just, I think that as a company and the dynasty that I think Mr. Hendrick has built, we have a lot of data. And then as we've been talking about, AI has to learn from something. It's got to have a knowledge base somewhere. So what are you going to train that AI on? Now, fortunately for us, because we've been doing this a long time, is we have a lot of that information. So basically the broader foundation you can build, the taller building you can build. So that's what we try to do and leverage our AI to do is we basically can train it on a multitude of data that we have. And then, yes, the predictions, we can have it make its own predictions. We can ask it specific questions or we can query things. And so, yes, it's think about being able, there's a lot of talk, AI agents are a big or a hot topic. So
Sure.
think about an AI agent that you could talk back and forth with that knew about racing, and not only knew about racing, but knew about 40 years worth of racing. Like that'd be a pretty sharp guy you'd want to talk to. So that's a little bit of how we've kind of leveraged all that.
That's so interesting. That is just so interesting. The one other question that I just thought of was, obviously HMS has had so much success, most successful team in NASCAR Cup Series history, all this success though, and now you have this AI advantage. And so do you look around the garage and do you feel like all the teams are using it? Obviously you guys have more resources, more employees, so you can use it more, but do you feel like it's kind of being adapted and adopted throughout the garage?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think every major team has some initiative going on. And if it's not a team initiative, I think that's been the power of things like Chat GPT, and Amazon and all those people that have, really democratized AI to where anybody can use it. And I'll be honest, if you're an engineer in this business and you don't have an AI prompt in the corner of your screen, you're falling behind. And so when I look around at all those guys that are carrying computers around the garage, I just assume that they have that window open in the corner of their screen. So, yes.
Okay. All right. Last question for you, Tom. Where do you see, I mean, we just talked about earlier in the conversation how AI has really just picked up steam. And I'm just curious where you see it for NASCAR 5, 10 years down the road. Where is AI playing a role in the sport?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think potentially designing tracks or venues to um, looking at driver safety, things we haven't even thought about. I feel like we're on the verge of kind of a new horizon of things and different ways to leverage AI. Yeah, just in general, I think, power plants is another opportunity to where, it could potentially optimize some things and get us further ahead. So yeah, I feel like when you get to the point of having AI agents be able to do some unsupervised learning. So instead of you just having to sit there and ask it the questions, what if it could go out and get its own data and formulate its own questions? That's what I see 5, 10 years from now. It's not only going to change, I think, the sport of racing, but probably the world. So it's a super exciting time. It reminds me of and I was really young when the internet first started, but I can remember America Online. So, and that was a wonderful thing. Yeah, I think we're on the verge of that. I think it's pretty big and it's pretty exciting. So I'm glad you're talking about it.
I hear the dial up of America Online right now. I hear the buzzing and the beeping in the
Yeah,
background.
for
Well, hey,
sure.
Tom, I really appreciate you taking the time and kind of sharing some insights of what HMS is doing with AI. I know it's a discussion that's going to continue and grow in the future. And I would love to have you back on in the future to talk more about it because I'm sure it will continue to expand and we'll have a lot more to talk about. So again, thanks for taking the time to visit with me.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Again, I want to thank Tom for taking the time to visit with me and sharing details of how HMS uses AI. And now it's time for our By the Numbers segment. And we're going to start with our race progression graphs from Darlington. And let's begin with our top 5 finishers from the track Too Tough to Tame. And several things stick out, including Chase Briscoe having an absolutely dominant day, Tyler Reddick not being far behind him, plus the impressive performances of Legacy Motor Club with both Eric Jones and John Hunter Nemechek earning top 5s along with a strong run by AJ Allmendinger. While Chase Briscoe had a strong day, the rest of the JGR cars didn't. Denny Hamlin had an up and down day and finished with the top 10. But Christopher Bell had problems with his car after that incident with Carson Hocevar on pit road, and Ty Gibbs had a very pedestrian day. As I mentioned in Monday's video, Hendrick Motorsports struggled with Chase Elliott, the best finisher of the bunch, at 17th. As the graph shows, it wasn't a day to remember, and Alex Bowman would like to forget it more than anyone else. HMS wasn't alone. The 4 Penske Wood Brothers cars had an equally lackluster performance at Darlington, with Josh Berry flaming out on lap 1 and the rest of the organization never appearing to be much of a threat throughout the race. Now let's take a look and see who were the biggest movers on Sunday, and we'll start with those heading in the wrong direction. As I just mentioned, the number 21 driver was easily the biggest loser on the day, starting third, having that first lap incident in which he never recovered, and he finished 38th. Christopher Bell was second worst with a loss of 22 positions, and we have a three-way tie for third with Kyle Larson, Austin Dillon, and Justin Haley all losing 17 spots. You might not think anything of that three-way tie until I show you those trending in the right direction, and take a look at that. We have another three-way tie for drivers who gained the same 17 positions between Brad Keselowski, Carson Hocevar, and AJ Allmendinger. Noah Gragson was second biggest improvement on the day, picking up 20 spots, with John Hunter Nemechek the big winner, gaining an impressive 26 positions. Moving on to our last 5 races analysis. I know it's been a while since I last did this, so we can't compare the previous week's numbers, but I do think there are some interesting things of note. Starting with Ryan Blaney holding down the top spot with an impressive average finishing position of 6.4, including 4 finishes inside the top 6. His 18th place result at Darlington, the only real blemish in his last 5 races. Coming in at number 2 is Sunday's winner, Chase Briscoe, with an AFP of 8.8. The number 19 JGR driver has been solid as well in his last 5 with 3 top 5s. William Byron slots in third at 11.4, but his last 5 races don't appear to be heading in the right direction based on his graph. He's followed by Eric Jones at 12.4, who's put together a pair of back-to-back top 5s at Darlington and Daytona. And Ross Chastain and his Trackhouse Racing teammate Daniel Suarez are tied for 5th at 13.2. Rounding out the top 10 are Chris Buescher, Austin Dillon, Joey Logano, and Brad Keselowski. And as we always do, I like to highlight some of the bigger drivers who find themselves further down on our list. And there's one that sticks out, A, because of his recent results, and B, timing of this segment. As you guys know, I've tracked this all season. And for those of you who've paid attention, you remember Chase Elliott was at the top of this list for much of the year. And that was due to him running inside the top 20 almost every race. Now the 2020 champion is coming in at 26 with a last 5 that includes 2 finishes outside of the top 25, and his best finish a 10th at Daytona. And now let's move on to our final item in today's By the Number segment, and that's our Mario Kart point standings. Again, it's unfortunate I haven't been able to track this for the last month, but as you can see in the updated standings, Kyle Larson is still barely clinging to a 1-point lead over Christopher Bell, and there are a couple of other JGR cars right on their heels with Chase Briscoe and Denny Hamlin all within 7 points of the lead. Chase Elliott, William Byron, and Ryan Blaney, who is at 161 points and 17 behind Larson, would appear to be the only drivers still in the hunt for the Mario Kart points title. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. Let's start with the By the Number segment. What statistic caught your attention? I'll tell you, after not doing this for a while, the last 5 races analysis and Chase Elliott's drop after where he's been most of the season was eye-opening to me. And lastly, what did you think of my interview with Tom Gray and Hendrick Motorsports' use of AI? Interesting to see where the sport is with AI and how it's changing the game. Thanks again for checking out the latest episode and supporting the channel. I really and truly appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.